So I didn't set out to paint a mural in the school. Initially, I just started with the skeleton with the angles of attack, simply because it's one of the basic things we show people all the time, and I wanted to have something to refer to. And then I painted on the opposite side of the wall. I painted the Philippines and the sword and the stick crossed. And gradually, over the course of about 7 years, I've added to and added things to it. And, most of it, I'd say 99% of it is informational. Some of it I just did for fun. I had a space I wanted to fill in, like the tiger. I just wanted to kind of fill in the space. And it was an interesting challenge to try to create a depth with just pure black and white with no gray tones, which is sort of an artistic challenge. Some of the things are almost code-like or hidden. For example, these is sort of an homage to the old Kung Fu television series, because these are the exact designs that they use for the dragon and tiger, and these are on the correct forearms. If I stand in front of the thing, that would be where they would be on your arms. So that's the reason why those are painted there. Because despite what people may say nowadays with the MMA craze, the Kung Fu television series was hugely influential for a whole generation of people, including myself. Arterial system in really simplified form, and it's obviously me, since I'm the only person I have here as a reference for the painting I use myself. So Subclavian arteries, aorta, it's all here so that we can look at it. The chain, the cadena, the flow, something we constantly talk about in the martial arts and the Philippine martial arts. I oftentimes refer to what we call a priori knowledge. A priori is written in another place on the wall. Stick fighting is the oldest martial art. Period. Nobody can really argue that. Somebody about 70,000 years BC picked up a club and brained somebody else. That's what the fossil record tells us, anywhere from 70 to 100,000 years ago. So for that long, we've been bashing each other with weapons. So this is very old. Certainly doesn't belong only to the Philippines. The Philippines have just evolved it to a high level. A lot of this stuff is code. You can see the LIS, LIW. This, for example, is inside sweep, high inside wing, low inside sweep, low inside wing. The numbers are primary and secondary responses. They're things that students should know. This one always kind of messes with people's heads. I've actually had a few students ask me if I was dyslexic. This is just to show people how their brains work, because if you just don't try to read the individual words, but if you just look at it as a sentence, it obviously says as simple as possible, as sophisticated as necessary. But none of those words are actually written there, but your brain can still interpret it. So I really try to get people to look at things a different way when we teach. Same thing with the 9 dots. Get your way out of 9 dots with only 4 lines, and you'll realize that the only way to do it is to go outside the box. Classic outside the box solution. So this is something I bring up in class all the time. In the sentence, I'm going to fight with you, the most important word is not fight, it's with. So with. So always, again, goes back to relationship. We're always talking about relationship. So with is the key word. Obviously, we refer to levers all the time. These are the 3 classes of levers, and I've applied them to anatomy so people can understand them. Again, because we're so involved in the weapon, I'm constantly utilizing the thenar eminence and the hypothenar eminence, and referring to the way to grip the stick correctly. So it's all kind of designed and drawn up here. Everybody has heard Bruce Lee talk about be like water. That's why it's very central. It's about being placid, essentially, being like water, being able to adapt and flow very naturally. I mentioned earlier about the punches and kicks are tools to kill the ego, so that's there. This is kind of important that people don't see it very often. You see Bruce Lee's 5 ways of attack here written out, but this is actually applying them to fundamental types of fighters. An attacker, defender, counterattacker, and a second intention fighter. Second intention fighter is a phrase we would use in fencing. Second intention means that rather than my first intention to hit, my second intention is to hit. So my first intention is to feint or fake. So a second intention fighter is somebody who uses a lot of feints. So this is a way to deal with him, is to use progressive indirect attacks. So that's what that is. The skeleton here, actually we can't really pass the big scary guy here without saying something about him. I wanted to have something that represented fear. Hence we have fear is written here, we have death written here. I wanted to make him raceless. I wanted to make him just a little bit bigger than most people so that he sort of represents that. We can't really tell whether he's armed or not. There's all those kind of mysteries and concerns, and I wanted something that was there that was sort of like a specter, something that was just looming. And so that's what he's all about. Obviously Filipino Kali. The snake, we talk about taking the fangs from the snake all the time. We do teach counteroffensive mindset here. We don't teach self-defense. Self-defense is a legal term. We don't actually teach self-defense. We teach counter-offense. The overhead view of the skeleton, we oftentimes talk about the planes of movement in this school. So we have the sagittal plane and the coronal plane. These are the sagittal and coronal sutures in the skull. So it helps us to orient those things. It also shows us how we can work on zoning, because we have an overhead view. So we have 100% zone, 75% zones, 25% zones. They all kind of relate to that viewpoint. Real human hand. Old Copulon, favorite weapon of mine. What else is here? Again, Yarn's relationship. The OODA loop, if you haven't looked into that, you certainly should. This is actually my chop. I have a chop for my certificates, and I just did a large painting of it, so that it would be that same thing. This is one of the, I mentioned earlier, painting I did for fun, just to make the paintbrush kind of float in the air. I was kind of bored one day, that's why I painted that. This is Musashi's sword guard, one of the most famous samurai swordsmen. So I painted his sword guard on the wall. This is one of my Japanese students came and said that what we teach in Japanese terms would be referred to as Shinken Shobu, which means fighting with real weapons for life and death. So Shinken Shobu. Obviously our central theme in this school is whatever works. This is kind of, again, this is somewhat written in code here. Real, imminent, no escape. These are the things you need to actually act in your own defense. You need the threat that faces you to be real. You need that threat to be imminent, and you need to have no reasonable escape. Those are the things that you need to be able to act in your own defense. You don't need to be attacked. That's a common fallacy that people think. The triangle is here, and if you look into this particular design, this has some uniqueness that I'll let you go and discover for yourself. But these triangles are written the same way. So safety awareness is the foundation, training skill is the next level, fighting skill is the last level. And the thing we talk about oftentimes is not just those levels, but the fact that it's written in a triangle, because the connection of safety awareness and training skill is obvious, because the more safe we can be, the more difficult our training can be, because we can keep one another safe. And the obvious connection between training skill and training skill and fighting skill, that nexus is that now I can apply my training skills in a combative way, but at this end we have the connection of safety awareness and fighting skill. And that nexus is really ignored. And this is really important, because when I'm training myself to be aware of safety, I'm also training myself to be able, when the situation calls for it, to be able to remove all of those safety blocks so that I can bring all of the lethality of my art to bear without inadvertently pulling my punches, because all I ever do is practice training safely. So I have to make it into a combatively effective art, so I have to be just as aware of not making it safe as I am of making it safe for training. So vigilance, preparedness, willingness, same thing, vigilance, preparedness, willingness. Vigilance I can definitely help people to develop. There's no question that what we teach in a martial arts school is preparedness. This is the big problem. This is the hardest thing to teach to people is, will you actually do it? And then you may have heard me actually say already the three most important things in our training in overall terms is understanding distance, understanding time, and understanding position. Also proxemics. Proxemics is essentially relational positioning. Again, it goes back to relationship all the time. Very famous old painting from essentially the 16th century. Interesting little side note, I mentioned this to you guys yesterday, my Canadian students, maple leaf up here, my Canadian students bought this rapier for me for my birthday a few years ago. The two things had nothing to do with each other. When I painted this, I just painted it about life size so it would have a good feel. One day I pulled out the rapier and I put it up next to my painting, and I realized it was exactly the same size. Pretty remarkable. So that was a pretty unique little discovery that it was exactly the same. So that's a little bit of serendipity, I guess, kismet. So this one is interesting. I try to cross-reference history a lot when I teach. And when we confront a barrier, whether it be an obstruction of an arm, or the way a person is holding their weapon, when we hit that sort of immovable barrier, we often try to say the person is building a castle, and our defense against the castle is to bypass the castle, rather than trying to be stronger than the person, because the 100-pound woman is not going to be able to be stronger than a 200-pound man. So rather than thinking in terms of brawn, we think in terms of tactics, organize the circumstances in our favor. End of World War I, the French decided they didn't want to have anything to do with trench warfare again, so they built a defensive wall called the Maginot Line, faces into Germany. Hitler looked at it and said, hey, that's really neat, and then he went around it and took Paris. No battles ever occurred, and they're still there to this day. Fantastic mountain emplacements with tunnels and cannons and everything else, and no battles ever occurred because the era of emplaced warfare was over, and it was now mechanized mobile warfare. So when we teach martial arts, we're always thinking of mechanized mobile warfare. We're not thinking of building castles. So we go around it. So you'll hear me say in class that we refer to it as the Maginot Line principle of bypassing obstructions rather than trying to power your way through them. Edge leverage line, 3 advantages, is a very common thing in fencing. We talk all the time about these. They're not listed in order of importance. They're just listed in the easiest way to remember them. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Antikythera mechanism. You should look this up. I have it here because it's a great example of ancient technology actually being far superior to what we tend to think it is in modern days. This is a prehistoric computer that they found in a shipwreck many years ago, and when they made computer models of it, it actually works as a way of tracking stars and so forth in the sky, and it's ancient. So it was found in a Greek ship in antiquity. So it's pretty fantastic. This is down at the bottom here, the USS New Jersey, the flagship of the Philippine Invasion Force. My father went to the Philippines October 20th, 1944, so that's there in homage to him and all those men who sacrificed themselves for that. Carabao, symbol of strength in the Philippine martial arts. This is lakas. This is the word strength in the Philippine language. I think I've kind of covered everything. Tons of weapons here. That's about it. This is a priori. Again, I mentioned a priori before. Knowledge inherent, something we talk about in class all the time. Little subtle things that people won't notice, and I'll just point them out. These are my brother's initials. My brother committed suicide about 12 years ago, and I just kind of keep him present here all the time. There's a few things that are here that are like that. If we go up to the corner of the wall, we see the scythe. Western culture, the scythe is symbolic of death. The angel of death carries a scythe. And in the little pouch there, just below the blade, are the skull fragments of my brother. So he's up there, he's here present with me all the time in the school. So that's about it on the wall.